Welcome everyone. My name is Sean, and today I got to give you some updates to the Jayden Perkins situations. If you'll remember, it was a story that was very emotional for me to cover because this 11-year-old ended up trying to defend his pregnant mother from an attack from a man called Crosetti Brand, who never should have been out on the streets in the first place. But now we've seen some members of the Illinois Board of Parole resign over this situation, but that resignation, or those resignations, come with additional lies because they're pretending, or at least they were pretending until they were caught, that they had no idea at all whatsoever that Brand, when he got out on parole the first time, attacked this woman, threatened her, and all that, and they weren't even notified that she was seeking an emergency order of protection under the belief that this parole board would be so stupid as to let him out again. Apparently, there are emails and documentation showing otherwise, and in reality, what we find out is what I speculated before, was that 11-year-old Jayden Perkins died because the Illinois Board of Parole didn't give a damn about his mother's pleas and didn't give a damn about his life. They only cared about the criminal because, as we all know, the criminal is just a victim of circumstances, and all we need to do is go soft on them, and then they'll stop offending, straighten out their lives. Oh wait, they just killed an 11-year-old boy. Now we're gonna get into this, but before we do, I want to thank everybody who signed up over on actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
And remind you that on Saturday, April 27th, in Austin, Texas, I will be at the Vulcan Gas Company for Minds Fest. Link to tickets, top of the description, 20% off when you use promo code AJW.
The CBS 2 investigators pressed the state for days. They finally admit mistakes involving the release of an inmate from Stateville Prison. Hours later, that inmate is accused of going on a deadly attack.
But first things first, I got to give credit to the local CBS affiliate right here for pressing the issue about these Illinois Parole Board members to the point where eventually they ended up resigning in shame due to the fact that they let out this career criminal, even though there were obvious signs that not only was he going to repeat offend, but he was going to attack the very same woman and family that he ultimately ended up attacking. And one of those signs was the fact that he was arrested for this in February, not to mention his previous criminal history of very similar results. Now, it's important to understand, because maybe I didn't make this clear enough in my previous video, that the 2015 case that I'm referring to, where Shannon is the woman in that particular case, it's not the same person as Jayden Perkins' mother, whose last name is Smith. To be clear about that. And for those of you who decided to leave comments claiming that Jayden Perkins' mother is at fault in this particular case because she let Brand in her life, I will just remind you that the restraining order, the last one that was issued against Brand, was from the year 2009. Before Jayden Perkins was even born. Before the other case in which he was convicted of, this woman was having problems. So if you're going to tell me that any mother who dates anyone, even around 15 years ago, is deserving of having their child murdered by that person because they didn't know that this person would turn out to be a killer 15 years ago, I don't know what to say to you. You're insane in every possible way. You're looking for a reason to blame somebody else besides the criminal. And maybe with that attitude, you might have a position on the Illinois Parole Board where they also blame everyone besides the criminal.
Now to breaking news involving a horrific crime in Edgewater.
11-year-old Jayden Perkins was stabbed to death. His mom, who is pregnant, was seriously injured, and we are learning she begged authorities for help before the attack.
CBS 2 has been combing through court records of the prime suspect and learned that mother alerted the justice system about threats even while the suspect was behind bars.
So what you need to understand, and I went over this in greater detail in my previous video, is that Brand was actually incarcerated for a 2015 incident where a woman broke up with him in October 30th of that year, and a couple of days later he showed up at her house in order to get back at this woman while she was cooking dinner for her kids. So after the first time this woman cracks the door, she tells him she doesn't want to see him anymore. Brand knocks on the door again, and then when she opens it, he forces his way inside, puts a gun to this woman's throat, assaults her, chokes her out, and her 15-year-old son comes out to see what is going on. Now, Brand actually had a 2-year relationship with this woman called Shannon. So, this kid likely saw him as a father figure at one point in time, yet he pointed the gun at this 15-year-old, threatened him, told him to get back, threw his mother into his room, and then stole her vehicle, and he was ultimately arrested. Now, the reason we have this information is because he appealed, and part of his appeal was saying that the police stopped stopping him was not legitimate, that he was racially profiled. So of course, he blames evil white racism for him getting caught in this situation, even though the evidence beyond the stop is very clear. On top of that, it was a stolen vehicle, so you should be stopped if you're in a stolen vehicle. Anyway, it turns out that the woman at the center of this whole situation, the one whose 11-year-old son died, actually had a previous relationship with Brand as well. And in fact, even before that particular 2015 incident, she had filed an order of protection against him because he became abusive with her as well. So that was filed, submitted with the court, but he ended up getting locked up and all that in that particular situation. However, when he was released, he was reminded of the orders of protection against him or something like that. And then a couple of months after that, he began sending threatening messages and targeting this other woman with her kids, including Jayden Perkins. And by the way, her unborn child that was inside her body. And of course, that eventually led to him trying to forcibly enter her property. He ended up getting caught for that in February of 2024, and he ended up being locked up for that, a parole violation. However, for some ungodly reason, likely because the Illinois Parole Board is set up not to adjudicate whether or not people will be safe on the outside, but for activists to achieve their goals of letting as many people out as possible for another parole hearing shortly after that. But even with that situation, you would think that they would be able to hold him based on the fact that he was originally arrested for going after threatening the life of his ex and her child, and when he was released, he was going after and threatening the life of his ex. So obviously, a normal, sane parole board, when this guy had only done about 9 years on a 16-year bid, would require him to go back to the state penitentiary and serve the remainder of his time. But this parole board ended up releasing him, and as CBS points out,
Joe and Erica, an emergency order of protection was denied. This pregnant woman, now fighting for her life in the hospital, warned a judge she could be attacked, and she feared for her life.
An emergency order of protection, and on top of that, her hearing for the follow-up order of protection.
Court records obtained exclusively by CBS 2 revealed on the day of the murder and stabbing, the mother and suspect were scheduled to step before a judge at 10:30 Wednesday morning. Keep in mind, the crime happened just 2 hours before that court appearance.
Was the same day that Jayden Perkins was murdered. She was actually expected to be in court at around 10:30 in the morning, but this man showed up and came with a knife, stabbed her up, and then stabbed her 11-year-old son, who heroically tried to defend his mother in that situation, and the son ultimately ended up dying.
Jayden Perkins' loved ones gathered for a celebration of life Monday, less than 2 weeks after the 11-year-old's friends and loved ones gathered near the Edgewater home, where he was stabbed to death on March 13th. Police say Crosetti Brand had the knife.
The offender was released from prison yesterday.
That's right, he was paroled and released from the Illinois Department of Corrections custody the day before the murder. And that release happened despite Jayden's pregnant mother, Lataria Smith, who was also brutally stabbed, pleading in court last month to try to get a protective order against Brand. A Cook County judge said a March 13th follow-up hearing about the order of protection that both parties were supposed to attend and directed Brand be notified in prison. IDOC and the Prisoner Review Board that gave the green light on Brand's release both told us they didn't know about this protection order hearing.
Now, as CBS 2 reports at this moment in time, the initial line from the Illinois Parole Board was that they did not know about this order of protection hearing, so it's not their fault that they paroled this individual. Now, like I said in my previous video on this subject matter, even if the Illinois Parole Board did not receive this notice, there was no record of it or anything like that, they still should not have paroled Brand based on the fact that he was incarcerated for 16 years for committing a crime, and then upon being paroled the first time, he attempted to commit the very same crime. Again, ex-girlfriend he wouldn't let go with her kids, tried to forcibly enter the house. That is exactly what he was convicted of, and he was rearrested for it. So based on that alone, a sensible parole board would remand him to custody. But it turns out they were lying about that. And again, CBS local affiliate in Chicago does the work, ends up hustling, and they discover that this is absolutely nonsense.
But emails and other records obtained by the CBS 2 investigators since this attack appear to contradict that. A February 22nd email states an employee with the Office of the Clerk of the Circuit Court of Cook County emailed the notice to an IDOC employee who she also spoke with on the phone. Today, a spokesperson for the clerk's office confirmed to us their office provided notification. Attempts to reach that specific Stateville Correctional Center employee were unsuccessful.
Now, as you can see right here, the clerk did their job. They were supposed to inform the parole board. They were supposed to inform the correctional institution. They appear to have the documents to show that they did in fact do that. And CBS, the local affiliate out there in Chicago, discovered this, and then they submitted this new evidence to the parole board. And guess what happened? Because this is absolutely crucial, because they didn't actually resign over the fact that they let this person out, and that resulted in the death of an 11-year-old. They were derelict in their duty, and the fact that they were saying, oh, well, we didn't know about the order of protection, as if that should have been the deciding factor. They resigned after the request from the CBS local affiliate. After they said, hey, you said X, we just proved Y, all of a sudden they're like, okay, you got us, we're gonna resign. Maybe we'll work in a nonprofit to get people like Brand out of prison rather than get paid by the taxpayer, because we finally got caught in a bit of an awkward situation. We finally bungled this enough that maybe people are gonna be paying attention.
Shortly after we submitted this new evidence to IDOC and the Prisoner Review Board for comment, Governor J.B. Pritzker announced the resignation of Prisoner Review Board member Leanne Miller, who wrote the report recommending Brand's release from prison.
Now, first of all, it is very interesting that Governor Pritzker announced the resignation of Leanne Miller, but also very important for you guys to take note of the fact that this is a woman, a female, who decided to write this report for this serial domestic abuser, escalating in his violence domestic abuser, to be released post the arrest that happened on his previous release by this very same parole board. I know a lot of people say, you know what, we need women in positions of power, because they're not going to be like those men who just ignore things, ignore red flags. They're going to be able to relate to the lived experiences of women. Well, here it is right for you.
It is clear the evidence in this case was not given the careful consideration that victims of domestic violence deserve. Pritzker's announcement said, in part,
the woman on the board, the one that was supposed to relate to the mother in this particular situation, is the one who drafted the rationalization for why this person deserved to be released, why his freedom shouldn't be denied just because, he has a tendency to break into his ex's properties and try to kill them, and if the kids get in the way, he is perfectly willing to attack them. It's absolute madness that this went on, but to be fair, there was additional accountability because the head of this board also resigned.
And late today, Governor Pritzker also announced the resignation of Prisoner Review Chair Donald Shelton. IDOC responded late today, acknowledging that their previous statement was wrong, and they did, in fact, receive a notification about the March 13th court date. We have asked if a communication failure like this could impact other people trying to get protective orders. The clerk's office said yes.
Now, I think that end note is absolutely crucial for a number of reasons. First and foremost, the clerk did say, hey, these miscommunications or whatever the Illinois Parole Board is going with at this moment in time definitely could impact other orders of protections, other releases, and whatnot. So it is an ongoing problem, and there has to be a way to streamline this particular situation. However, I also like that the Illinois Parole Board had to admit that yes, they were in fact notified after it was proven that they were notified, and we have consequences in that 2 members of this board ultimately ended up resigning as a consequence of this particular case. It would be great if we saw similar levels of accountability in other situations, but I'll take it in this particular case. And I think the visceral response that so many people had to this 11-year-old heroically defending his pregnant mother in a situation where he never should have had to. I need to emphasize that over and over and over again. This is not a random vicious act of violence. This is a random vicious act of violence that was infinitely foreseeable by the Illinois Parole Board. They just refused to do anything about it. They sided with the criminal. They said Brand, with his long history of offenses, his repeat pattern of behavior, was not only deserving of a second chance, but when he violated that, trying to commit the very same crime, the exact same offense, he tried it again. You know what? He needs a third chance, because I don't know if you guys know this, poverty's really bad. I don't know if you guys know this, Brand is the victim. And it turns out, no, that's not the case. The victims were the actual victims of these crimes. The victims were the people who were begging for help from the system, who got turned away over and over and over again because the system was tilted in favor of the criminal. And don't think I am going to let Kimberly Fox off the hook, because he tried to enter this woman's home and he could have been seriously charged for that on top of his parole violation. So maybe there was a bail amount or some other additional conditions that would have prevented him from being released. But Kimberly Fox couldn't be bothered either. She's another one of these strong women that know the women's perspective. And the women's perspective in her district attorney's office is, good luck, send your 11-year-old to go fight off this attacker, try to save your life, because the city of Chicago is far more concerned about catering to the criminals rather than single mothers that are putting in the work trying to raise their kids.
Outrage over why Brand was free.
The defendant has a history of domestic violence and had only been recently released from serving a sentence from a prior conviction. The victim had an order of protection against him from previous encounters, and this history paints a disturbing pattern of behavior.
And that's really how it is in the city of Chicago. And Jayden Perkins, unfortunately, bore the brunt of this, paid the consequences for this. And by the way, I just want to point out that we have a movement in our country, a nationwide thing that has instituted major changes in not just the places where incidents happen, but all over this country and even at the national level. It's called Black Lives Matter. For some reason, if Brand would have been shot by the police, they would have advocated for him. They would have talked about him as the victim, this career criminal that attacked people. But the fact that he stabbed an 11-year-old black boy, we got to emphasize race now because that's what the movement's about. These people are completely silent on it. They don't talk about it. They're not interested in it, because in reality, in actuality, BLM is all about criminals. They're all about convicts. They're all about undermining our institutions, undermining our criminal justice system. And when you point out that the criminal justice system should have had the tools, should have had the power to make a difference in this case, they're not to be concerned. They say, don't worry about it. They say, you know what? Shut your face. Those black lives don't really matter all that much. We might group them in with statistics when it's convenient for us, but right now it's inconvenient. So we're just going to talk about the sad sack criminal that definitely deserved to be shot. In fact, one of these BLM hoaxes that ended up coming up was they said some guy, and I forgot what state it was in, was attacked by the police for holding a gardening tool. And then the video came out and he was charging the police officer with the gardening tool that he was holding like a weapon. So that guy they were going to defend until the body cam footage completely demolished their position. But Jayden Perkins, this elementary school kid, this 11-year-old, this hero, by the way, who again fought off or tried to fight off an armed adult man in order to save his pregnant mother's life, who did save his pregnant mother's life, by the way, don't worry about it. That's not a big deal. That's not our concern. Look, I'm glad, I'm happy, I'm elated that there were some consequences for this, but the fact of the matter is, the clerk says there likely is no change for this. And with the ideologies in place in the state of Illinois, in Cook County, and in the city of Chicago, represented by these district attorneys, by Brandon Johnson, and by the governor, and by this overall trend in the Democratic Party, leads me to believe that this will likely occur again. But hey, you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I want to know your guys' thoughts down in the comments below. If you liked the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the updates and accountability in the Jayden Perkins case. Till next time.